Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Anna, and I'm the founder of Second Careers. I help people find their fit in tech. And today we have Elena here, and she will be walking us through her experience creating a UX product design career in the tech industry. So, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
So, I'd love to start with a bit of an introduction. So, tell us, where are you based? What are you up to right now?
Yeah, so currently I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but I'm originally from New York, which is where my career in tech actually got started. And I run my own UX studio and I work with a lot of early stage founders.
Amazing. Thank you. So basically, let's start from where you started, kind of the beginning. What
Yeah.
got you interested into UX design and entering the tech industry in general?
So when I was still living in New York City, I was a visual designer. So I was doing, climbing the corporate ladder. And I was like, I'm going to be here forever. And then, a year goes by and I was like, I don't know. Something just wasn't really sitting. And someone mentioned UX design because, when people who don't know about UX design or design, they hear design and they think it's all the same. And so I was looking into it a little bit more and I took like a mini class through General Assembly, like a 2 hour course about UX design. And it just, all the lights were just going off. And I was like, that is amazing. You can be creative, analytical, you can talk to people, you can do your own thing, all in the same job. And so that was just something that I didn't know I was looking for. And now I just can't imagine doing anything but that. And so then from there, I was like, okay, I'm going to do whatever it takes to end up there. I don't care
Hmm.
what it is. So I was taking night classes. I still had my corporate job, and then I was just networking like crazy. I reached out to so many people. I went to as many events that I could, and luckily this was in 2019 before the big UX boom. So that definitely helped a little bit. So I
Hmm.
did end up doing a boot camp through BrainStation. And this was also before boot camps were like a huge prevalent thing. So I just kind of slid in there, did night classes, and from there just reached out to as many people as I could to see how can I just keep practicing the UX skills. And
Hmm.
so then when I was ready to start looking for a job, I could just like hit the ground running.
Yeah, wow. So it seems like you already came from a creative industry, right? Can you briefly give us an overview of what were you doing before you found your passion for design and maybe some of the skills you learned in your previous work experience that helped you kickstart your new career?
Yeah. So visual design, I'd obviously focus on what it looks like and just placement of information. And so I was working in a private equity conference company. So it was really, really niche. And you had to make a really boring industry relatively interesting using very strict brand guidelines. So that part was really interesting because with any kind of career you have, there's going to be constraints. So working with really strict constraints while having to make something that was interesting was a really good challenge that I was able to take to UX because everything is constantly, okay, how can we make this using this? Like, how can we move things around? So I was on the marketing team and I was creating all the marketing collateral for all of the North American events. So that was 21 events, and each thing had like multiple brochures, postcards, websites. Each thing had about like 10 different collateral, and there's 21 conferences. And it was just me. And I was the first hire for that office. Typically, the London office was handling everything. So I was creating that whole department also for this company. So there was a lot of just like collaborating with different people who weren't familiar with design. People are usually just like, hey, can you make this tomorrow? And I'm like, there's a process. And like everything has a process. And UX is a very process oriented thing. So that was able to translate really well of educating people about how they can expect to work with me or how they can anticipate the deliverables to work, how they can collaborate, how we can kind of go through that iterative process. So that is really useful, I think, across all different kind of careers.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like you're already in a slightly adjacent role where you were practicing some of the skills, but obviously not all of them because UX product design is a little different than marketing materials, but you
Yeah,
did experience a lot of the teamwork and like business requirements and just kind of the collaboration aspect of how do you navigate working in a company and creating something for business needs, right? Because that is
exactly.
basically what everyone does in a job.
Hmm. Especially when sometimes there's disagreeing things where one department's like, "Oh, we need to have this," and then someone else is like, "No, no, 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 we don't," because you have the marketing people who are the people who are briefing it to me, who are basically like you could call product managers, but from this marketing side. But then you have the conference people who are in charge of the whole conference, and so they get the final approval. And then you have me who's coming in being like, okay, this is how it actually is coming together, and I have to make sure everyone is in sync, and that very rarely happened.
That sounds like one of those memes where you showcase what your parents think of you, what your friends think
Yep.
of you, and what you actually do, right?
Yeah, people have like they're like, "Ooh, could you do this and this and this?" I'm like, "No." Like I'm like not trying to be like, "No, you can't," but there are so many strict rules. We can't just like add pink. This is like a very corporate company for like
Yeah.
people with investment firms of like billions of dollars. We can't just randomly, put this in because you had a cool idea. So that
Yeah.
relationship was a huge part of the job.
Yes, you learned a lot of what's called in tech like stakeholder management. And of course, that comes up a lot in corporate as well. So you had that experience just working with people, which is basically the number one experience that
Yeah.
helps you do anything. Let's pivot into what steps you took to build up some skills for the product design of roles that you're looking for. What did you do there?
So when I first was doing the boot camp, the biggest reason I did it was more for accountability. So like I'm not going to be here like telling anyone that they should or shouldn't go to a boot camp. That's like a whole other conversation. But the point is you need to be able to find whatever modality of learning that you know you're going to follow through on. Because with such a saturated market, the people who are doing things over and over and over just to get strengthen their skills, talk to more people, those are the people who are going to shine. And so when I was getting started, I realized, okay, it's not as saturated as now, but there's still going to be a lot of competition. And, you need experience to get experience. So when I was going through this, I was reaching out to people to just create projects. I just wanted to be in that mode of, I need to get as many case studies just so I, one, feel confident and I don't feel like I have that imposter syndrome of why do I need to be here? Because I'm like, no, I did 3 projects, I did 4 projects that weren't just school. So I didn't even start applying to jobs like right after I was done learning. I gave myself a 6 month window and it was like, Elena, you're not even gonna get hired because your portfolio is bad. It doesn't have the things, you don't have the experience. Why would someone hire you? And that wasn't just like imposter syndrome speaking, it was just me trying to be realistic, being like, I have a case study that looks exactly the same as the other 700 people. What can I do? I don't want to waste months and then come to the conclusion. I want to just do this now. So I reached out to a few nonprofits, and like there was lists of people like looking for them, like Catch a Fire was one. I didn't end up using it, but it's one of those types of websites where you can find nonprofits that like need a website or just need some kind of thing created. And so I would reach out and say, hey, I'm a UX designer and this is what that means. Because very often people don't, the regular person, even tech people honestly, don't necessarily know what UX is or that they are seeking that. They are like, I just need a web designer. So I'm like, hey, okay, I'll give you what you want if you also let me do what I need. So I created, I think, 3 or 4 websites. And while that's not like a robust like app or product, I was able to harness all the things I needed for a case study. Like I did all the user research. I did like information architecture and flows, and I tested with people and iterated and was able to collaborate with different people. And I even found an open source app at the time and joined that team. And so I was just finding as many things that I could just get my hands on, do the work, and then have something to show for myself so then I could actually move forward feeling more prepared. And I mean,
Mhm.
it worked. It like once I started my search, it like slid into place like extremely quick.
Right, that makes a lot of sense because you continue to strengthen your skills after the fundamentals. And just to reflect back a little of what you were sharing, after boot camp, you learned some basic skills, and the boot camp experience helped keep you accountable to just be comfortable with Figma, understand the basics of user research, understand what a flow is, just the basics, right?
Yeah.
Like when we're, I don't know, 1 years old and we're trying to walk, right? But we're not going to
Hmm.
start running right away. But the job search is a bit like running.
Yeah. It's like, go,
um,
go, go.
so it's really insightful that you understood that your portfolio has to stand out in a UX job search because that is the piece of evidence that showcases your work, and your work will determine
Hmm.
who's going to interview you. So if you don't have um, a piece of work that really showcases your understanding beyond, I know how to use Figma, people
Hmm.
can't respond in the way that you're actually wanting them to, which is help me build something for you, right? They want to know, what did you build already? Every single person out there is, what did you do already, right?
Hmm.
So it's an excellent perspective because it helps shift your focus away from take a chance on me or just like begging or feeling desperate to clearly taking action that is oriented towards your goals, right?
Yeah.
So you're
And
not stuck in this learning cycle and never practicing.
mhm. And the benefit of reaching out and doing it with like an actual like client, whether it's paid or not paid, is there is that level of accountability and push that you wouldn't get from a school project. Like if I don't do a great job at a school project, the consequences are super low. Like the teacher will be like, oh, like, this way you could do better. And you're like, oh, okay. And then you probably don't go back and fix it. But when I have actual meetings with someone who I have to present them to and give you output, like I
Mm-hmm.
can't just do, I'm not, and well, also just like the integrity. I don't want to just make a bad site because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like if I'm signing up to do something and helping you, I'm going to take it seriously. And having that like realness added that pressure of like, okay, I need to treat this like seriously. And then also when you're in an interview, you can speak to it a lot better than just some random school project because you actually had to think through things. Like, in school, you're just like, let me just try this for the first time, da da da. And you just kind of, it's not the best. It's probably honestly kind of bad. But when you're doing it with a real person, at least you're thinking through things because you're like, oh shoot, I didn't really think about that. And then you're you're actually touching it. You know what I mean? It's like it matters a little bit more. And you can tell when someone's talking about it that it matters more than me just being, yeah, this. So I redesigned Spotify versus I'd be like, man, okay, I was working on this project. And, they lean in and there's just all that body language associated with talking to someone who actually cares. And that's something you can't really create unless it's actually something you care about.
Absolutely. So, to summarize, create real world projects with real people that have real business needs and real requirements that matter
Yes.
to someone else. It cannot, you have to move away from what do I want to do today to how can I
Hmm.
create value that matters to other people and also intersects with some of my interests, right? And if your interest is a
Yeah.
job, you probably will be more open to what you will create, even if you don't have a passion for, I don't know, saving animals or
You're like, I hate animals.
donating cars or whatever nonprofits focus on. That doesn't have to be a passion for you, but the the most important part is that it's a real world company, even if it's a nonprofit, and they have needs that their users have. So you're designing for real world people.
And along those lines, I know you can't maybe be as picky in the beginning, but when you do find something, even if it's not the industry that you're interested in, the reason that I love UX is you become like a mini expert in like domain expert into a bunch of things. So I specifically work with a lot of different clients because I just am like, I don't want to pick. I just get really excited with all these different types of things. And so, I mean, that's just how I'm leaning, but just falling in love with parts of the process can give you that motivation for different types of projects too. Like for example, right now, this has been my favorite client ever, just because the project is so complex and but it's fun. But it's for like pipeline integrity, which it's basically making sure oil pipelines stay healthy so they don't break and spill oil. And I knew nothing about the oil industry. Never ever would I think that I would be working for someone like that, but it's actually very important, extremely important. But I'm like, I love this. Like we have these meetings, I'm like, yes, like sensors, all this. And that's the thing that gets me super excited. It's not that I'm like, oh, I love oil. It's that I love the problem. And then on the contrary, I worked for a big like Fortune 500 company doing an e-commerce thing, and I hated it. I won't say the name of the company, but I spent 3 months creating a balloon experience to buy balloons, like literally just buy balloons on the website. And I absolutely lost my mind because I am not like a consumer of party goods. I am very much a minimalist. I throw a lot of parties, but I'm like, I do not decorate because I think it's bad for the environment. And just being on it, just I'm like, I don't care. We're running out of helium. Why am I why are we spending this project $1 million? Why are we doing this? And it's not even launched. But anyways, the point is that sounded like when I told people I worked on it, they're like, "Oh my god, that's so cool! It's like this really sexy brand. Everyone knows it, Fortune 500." And I was miserable versus this like random startup in the pipeline industry. I'm like, I love them. So just finding that kind of what do you love within any kind of project is going to help you find different things, even if you're just building your portfolio or you're looking for types of jobs. Finding that light that you can attach to is going to just
Mm-hmm.
also propel you forward because people want to work with people who are happy to be there. Like if you're
Mm-hmm.
just like, yeah, I'm just here because like I need money, it just reeks of desperation. Like we can all tell. You don't have to lie and say, I've always wanted to work in furniture, but like that's okay. Like you don't have to put on that show. They can also smell that. But it's more, I just love UX. I love trying to figure out how can I make furniture interesting.
Yeah,
So
it's
that's
putting
that's like the approach.
pivoting kind of the perspective. It
Hmm.
doesn't have to be so focused on the industry, though. If you have a background in some kind of industry, you can totally use that to your advantage. But it's really
Hmm.
about the passion for the actual craft. So if anyone's like done a UX design boot camp or maybe 1 to 2 years in um, their career, like if it's not something you actually want to wake up doing, there's other ways to apply your skills in the tech industry. There's a million other jobs out there, but it's really about really enjoying the process and
Hmm.
understanding how to apply that process to actual real life and business
Hmm.
challenges, right? Um,
Absolutely.
so I'd love to pivot into kind of how you went from, finding your first job to creating a company, and now you're not job hunting but client hunting. Okay,
Yeah.
like what does that look like for you?
It's like the lesser of two evils, still evil. um, so this is the way I got my first in was very like stars aligned kind of thing. So I'm not going to set this as like the norm. And I also want to caveat, I know it's a huge privilege to be able to prolong your job search, but like I had my full-time job and I didn't quit it until I had something. So there is that. I know there is different circumstances where some people are like, no, I need a job tomorrow because I quit my job. So I'm like, okay, everyone handles it differently. Um, so when I was networking and reaching out, I was on, I think, Hexagon UX, one of the Slack groups. And I posted and I said, I just want to observe. Like, I know, I've been seeing these videos, I've been doing it, I've been learning, but like, I haven't really been around other people who know what they're doing, not just fellow students, but I want to just see a professional do it because I learn very well from just seeing real life. And so I'm like not here. I'm not trying to like pick your brain. I don't need you to hire me. I also just don't like that phrase. It's like, ugh. um, I just want to watch you, and in exchange, I'll just do whatever like crap work you don't want. Like I'll organize your files. I'll label your layers. some intern something. You don't have to pay me for just an hour of your time. I just want to watch. And someone reached out to me and they're like, okay, let me one up you. I'm going to hire you. And I was like, wait, oh my God. So Diane Eberhardt of the Design Project, at the time it was Eberhardt Design. It was a small UX studio. So I always credit her because she really did give me my first start. She saw that level of initiative. And there is that level of like timing, but also if I hadn't already filled my portfolio with these real projects, if I hadn't already been reaching out to people and been able to have an intellectual discussion that doesn't reek of desperation, she wouldn't have said that. So it's kind of like everything kind of coming together. Obviously, not everyone is just going to hand you that, but she was like, "Let me, yeah, I would love. That's the kind of energy I want." So she basically hired me because of my attitude and experience kind of coming together. And so she's like, I'll hire you as an apprentice. I know you're a junior, so that's okay. Like, you can learn on it, you can shadow me, but like, I'll pay you. So I continued on with them actually for 2 years. Like, when I started getting other clients, I ended up staying with them because I'm like, this is just a really great way to keep learning. Um, and it just, word of mouth just kept spreading. So I ended up getting a few other clients, and people just reached out. And I think a big part of the how word of mouth works is you have to just let people know what you're doing. Like, you can't, people can't read your mind, and especially if you're changing careers, like, it's not bragging, you're just informing people. No different than like someone being, oh, I'm not a teacher anymore, I decided to go to dental school, and you're like, oh, okay. It's just people just telling people in their life what's going on, and just having that consistent reputation of being the type of person who is learning, like, that goes a long way. That curiosity, no matter what career you're in, whether in tech or you're switching or whatever, people will remember how you treat them, if you were helpful, if you had a good attitude. Because some of the clients I've gotten several years later were from people I talked to 5 years ago, hadn't talked to them in between, and think, hey there, are you still doing? I'm like, yeah, actually I am. And then they're like, okay, great. We actually need someone, and you came to mind. I was like, I'm shocked I came to mind, but it's like we haven't talked, and yet it really does stick with people. So I got enough, and then I did finally get that coveted full time job, and that was from LinkedIn actually. A recruiter had reached out to me on LinkedIn, and honestly, it was like I only really had about like 5 recruiters reach out to me, so it was very. I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And I did do that, so I stopped doing a lot of the other jobs, and then I hated it. So that was also a huge learning of, grass is greener. I was like, that's the thing that everybody wants. Everyone wants that full time job. And I have it. And I'm like, I am so miserable. Not because of like the UI, the company just was very toxic and kind of bait and switch where they knew UX was getting hot, and then I didn't do any UX. I was more of like a business analyst. And I was like, you are so sneaky. And I would be like, can I do UX work? And they're like, yeah, later. But like, first, I literally proofread copy on PowerPoints. And I'm like, as my job. And I was like, that's like not my job. And they're like, yeah, like, yeah, you'll design something later. And I'm like, we are an extremely large company. I'm sure we have clients. And they're like, yeah, just not for you. And so it was just a really good wake up call of, just because you have a thing doesn't mean that's your end. We're constantly, how can we keep improving ourselves? Because there's going to be a day we're going to keep moving on. And that's just like how those go. So I started picking up more of my side clients just because I was miserable. And I was like, I need to do UX. And my mentor said to me, like, it was getting really, like, I was like losing so much sleep. And my mentor, who had helped me through a lot of this, was like, you should quit. And I said, wait, whoa, what do you mean quit? This is what I've been working for. She's like, you literally hate it. Like, you are crying. And I was like, I can't quit. She's like, you could go, she's like, do freelance. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you have 5 clients right now. Like, you're good. Like, they trust you. You're doing a good job. And I think a lot of juniors don't realize, like, I mean, some juniors are bad, but like a lot of you, if you actually put in the time of using your brain, you can do a great job. And like if you just let go of, oh, I don't know, clearly if people are hiring you and they are continuously coming back to you, good stuff is happening. So I did finally, I quit, and it was the scariest thing ever because I was like, oh my God, okay. And then that day I got a call from Epix, which is MGM Studios, one of their streaming services, and they're like, "Hey, we actually have like a maternity leave gig. Come on down." And I was like, "What?" And so my career's kind of propelled of just jumping from contract to contract, and the timing did seem a little like universe is like really doing wonders for me, but I attribute a lot of that to, yeah, the flexibility and the timing of just being like, you know what, this wasn't my plan, but I'm going to go with it. So just getting away from that rigidity of, I have to do this, I have to do this because this is what everyone else is doing. And that's how I have my own company, because I realized I love this lifestyle. It can be a little stressful, like trying to find people, but that chase is also like kind of the thing that I like, and just working with different clients. And I never would have expected to love working from home, being freelance, not like not having PTO. Like all those are things when I started, I'm like, never. And now I'm like, no, I my life is amazing with that. So just being flexible, and just as something pops up, you're like, okay, let's just see how that goes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing all that. So, one thing that kept coming up is this idea of alignment, of really identifying, well, what are you passionate about? Okay, the process of UX design and applying that in the business world, great. Okay, then what else, are you passionate about in terms of lifestyle? Like, what really fits for you? Like, do you need secure income and healthcare because you have 3 kids, or do you want just like more freedom to like take a month off and do whatever you want? um, is working from home really important, or like are you someone really extroverted and like it's really important to be around people? So it's really really vital to examine all these different areas of like who you are as a person. And sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
certain people have like very specific passions about like a certain industry, right? Like mental health, for example, that's pretty big
Mm-hmm.
now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you could say, yeah, I like it, but some people are really deeply passionate about it, and you can use your skills that you learned in the tech space, whether it's design, development, whatever, in whatever your passion is in life as well. So really strive to create alignment, right? And what I
Mm-hmm.
really enjoyed hearing kind of is the process of things really working out for you because you were doing them in a way that made sense for who you are and for your
Mm-hmm.
own life. You weren't just taking like a template advice. And honestly, I feel a lot of people are taking templated advice because they have so much fear of doing something that matters for them,
Mm-hmm.
right? So just take that chance and do the things that matter, essentially.
Yeah, a big reminder for everyone, and even like myself, is like, just because you saw it on the internet doesn't mean it's truth or like your truth. And I mean, even things I'm saying right now, like, you know, everything you should always be thinking about and be like, does that make sense? Does it make sense for me? Um, Especially when it comes to, if you're a junior UX designer trying to find a job, there are so many UX influencers, like so many, and they're all saying the same thing. I used to be one of them. Like I also used to give a lot of UX career advice, and like a lot of it is very helpful, but a lot of it, like sometimes it's not a good fit for you. And every single person who listens to it, a lot of their portfolios also look identical. And so if you're looking up examples of portfolios and you're all looking at the same examples, then of course they're all going to be the same and you're not going to stand out. So that's where that critical thinking needs to come in a little bit, where it's like, oh, but this person did it. I'm like, okay, they probably also looked at the template you saw. Like, there's just so many patterns. I used to run a UX mentorship program, and I would work hands on with people. And I've done like hundreds of these portfolio reviews. And I can even, like, with my eyes shut right now, I could probably name like the same 15 mistakes of, if I picked any of you that are listening to this right now and just grabbed yours, I could just blindfold, give you feedback, and then I'd look and I'd be like, it probably applies, because everyone makes the same kinds of mistakes. because we're all taking the same kind of advice. So
Mm-hmm.
so it's just like think about it and like pick not just like pick and choose, but just like say, why am I listening to this? And does this make sense? Like some things you're just like, okay, I don't really know. I might as well try it. But there's some things where you're like, what? Why would I do that? That sounds like really probably not okay. Like, let's say if someone was like, you need to drive to the recruiter's house and like boombox it, like if you really want to make a difference and you want to stand out, like people don't, everyone works from home now, so you can't send donuts to their office anymore. You have to go to their house, and it's like, or they'll call the cops. so, so it's like, let's like think about this a little bit, or just try
Yeah.
new things. That's like a whole iterative thing. Is
Yeah.
if people are reading your stuff and they're like, "Yikes! Oh, interesting. Let's change that a little bit."
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like this whole industry that got created around career change and getting into tech, like before that happened, people just like discover tech as an interesting thing to do that's maybe more innovative and more creative than other industries. And they're like, what can I do to kind of do something there? Like, what
Mm-hmm.
could be a good fit? So you kind of had to start from scratch and kind of figure it out. And there's articles here and there, and maybe little videos of people describing their profession, but there wasn't this like boom of here's this path, which honestly, there is no exact path. It has to be more creative than what you imagine, and it has to be innovative because tech is not a place where you're going to follow a template. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to learn from others for the first couple of years, but after that, don't tell me you're going to still do the same things. If you are, either you really like your salary and you're just waiting to earn a certain amount and retire, fine. But
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get bored and your life is going to suck. So, like, if you're going into the tech space, boot camps are for learning, not for doing. Like they're just not structured for the doing part. Even with the projects you do, they're learning projects. They're not creative ways to showcase who you are and what matters to you, right? So, kind of understand those differences. And the doing part is more difficult because it is based on who you are and you got to sit with yourself and figure that out. So that's my main message on that.
And just like any expectation or promise that you hear that you will get a job out of it, like you need to just like take from your head and just like throw it out the window twice. Because it's like maybe once in a blue moon someone it just happens to work, but it is extremely unlikely. And when we enter into that mindset of like all I have to do is go this, I get my diploma and I get a job, it's like it's not 1953 anymore. Like like that happened to my dad, and we'll have these conversations. He's a mason like at a construction company, and he literally walked up and said, "Hey, I hey man, I can, I'd like to work for you." And his dad was there and was like, he could do a good job. And they're like, great. And he's been there for like 53 years. And he's like,
Yeah.
all you have to do, and I was like, okay, no. It's just we can't. And I think a lot of people think you can because of the promises from the boot camps, and that's where it gets sketchy. I'm like, I'm not saying don't do the boot camp, I'm saying don't have high expectations of the outcome unless you are willing to do basically your own boot camp part 2,
Mm-hmm.
independent boot camp, where you are going in and just doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. That's like the next part of the career change path. But it's more creative and it's very different than what a lot of people expect from the learning part. So we'll just end there on that particular topic. Thank you. We can definitely follow up later on that. That's a really interesting and large topic. So, just to close things up, maybe there's a message that you can leave people with based on your experience. Um, like, why go into tech and how do you navigate it?
Okay, so why go into tech? I think because we're in a techie world now. Like it's just an integral part of our lifestyle. Like everything, every industry is going to be touched by this. So it's not a matter of like, oh, I need to be in tech. It's a matter of, do I want to be making impact on the way people are living? Because any kind of thing that we do is eventually going to be touched by it in some way or not. So it's like, oh, you don't have to want to be a coder or want to be a UX designer or, want to do data, whatever. The point is, if you are going to have a job ever, you'll probably have some semblance of it. So if you want to make some sort of impact in like that kind of space, then I would just start having those skills because everyone's going to need some type of skill. And then that's only going to propel you higher and give you more choice. Like, especially like, for example, let's say AI. Everyone is like, oh, I'm familiar with AI. Some people use it a little bit more than not. It's like, in my opinion, it's here to stay. And so it's like the people who are going to have the most flexibility for what they want to do and have the decisions to say what kind of jobs do I even want to have are going to be the ones who have the most knowledge and the most experience. So it's more about, for me, broadening opportunities, and tech is just a huge umbrella. You know, I think you had mentioned another time that tech isn't just like, oh, I'm in tech or I am in medical or I am in, the eco world. Like they are, everything is like crossing. So you can still, it's so flexible. You can be in tech, but in all these other things. Like I'm in all these industries. It's like I'm in the oil industry. I was like, I'm in like civil rights industry. It's just it's so widespread. So that's the first part. I don't know if that answered your question or if it became a rant. Um, I think the thing that is going to help you stand out the most, not just now when you're searching, but just keep you in mind, is you need to ask good questions. And I'm not just talking about like, oh, like face value of, what is the scope or what's this? But the people who are actually curious, why is it like this? Or how can I make an impact? And it's not just like, oh, I have to ask these questions because I'm like working right now. It's the people who are holistically like when they're off the clock, their mind is just won't shut off. Like those are the people who can be the most successful because it'll come more second nature. So the way you can improve that skill if you're not naturally that kind of person is just force yourself to keep asking questions. Like even and I think about usability all the time. Like not even just when I'm working, I'm constantly asking questions about like, why things are set up that way. I'll be like, who decided to do it this way? There's this door at my friend's apartment that has a big button that says unlock, but the unlock handle is like way over there, and I'm like, why is there a button to unlock the door? Can't you just like open it? And so my first question is like, first of all, what? But also I'm like, what? I wonder why, because this is such a like a dumb thing. There must be a reason they didn't, and I'm wondering what kind of constraints did they have that they couldn't just put the unlock button on the handle. And so it's like that's a really small question, but I'm constantly thinking about those kind of things just as I navigate life, and it makes me a better UX designer because it comes more second nature. Where when someone tells me a piece of information, I'm constantly like, what else do I need to know to make a more informed decision? And that will stem into your job search, because one, people will be able to tell that you're actually a curious person and you're not a forced curious. Like it's two different categories. I've met, I'd say, more people than not say they're curious and they're not, and that's not a bad thing, but it's going to hold you back. I would say like I've only really met like 5% of the people that I have mentored. I'm like, you're actually really good at this, and you can tell just by the questions they're asking. Are they actually thoughtful questions, or are they questions that they like Googled because they're like, I know I have to ask questions. Okay, what am I gonna say? Or if it's something that you like actually care about, I'm like, oh yeah, that's actually a really good question. So that's a huge thing. And when you're, it just stays in people's minds too. Because if you can ask a question no one else thought of and like put them at pause, that will also keep you more memorable to people that are interviewing you or even doing informationals, because they're like, that person is kind of smart. Like it really does make you seem smarter, which honestly helps a lot of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a fan of asking questions, and I often talk about this as well. So, um, if there's one thing that you do, it's focus on really asking good follow up questions, asking things that maybe seem obvious, asking things that you haven't heard maybe others talk about, and
Hmm.
just not taking things at face value, but really taking that next step and asking a question about what led to what we're seeing today,
Yeah.
because
Like,
that's what shows insight and curiosity. And yeah, that's a very important skill. And that's what's going to drive you as well, because that's curiosity is very tied to motivation, right? Because if I'm curious, I'm motivated naturally because my curiosity
yes.
will be like, I got to Google these things and like learn what this means and what is this person saying and what are best practices. And then you're putting these pieces together. So not only are you educating yourself, you're giving yourself inspiration for kind of the next thing that you're going to do. And you can ask questions because you have more information, right? So,
Yeah. And it makes life more fun and like less boring. You
mhm.
know how, when you're like about to go to sleep and then you're like, oh, what's a group of armadillos called? I have to know. And it's like you can't go to sleep until you figure it out. And you're
Is
like, and
that
then you're like on
was that
YouTube.
yesterday?
No, now I want to know what they are. I just thought of it. Now I need to know. I'm gonna look that up right
And this
after.
is a
But
huge, huge area where like natural human motivation starts to work, like your internal motivation. But that's also a bigger topic for discussion, which we
mhm.
could come back to. So thank you
Yeah,
so much for joining me today. And hopefully everyone listening gains a lot of value.
yeah,
Have a great day.
absolutely.